Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste and a very warm welcome to all of you to the Blub World Web Talks 127th episode. In the last 126 episodes, we have interacted with more than 2,000 educationists, school leaders, academicians from all across the globe to talk about how are they innovating in their education ecosystems. What's new that they're doing, what's new that's happening, and we have documented somewhere around 500 amazing ideas out of these, out of which around 100 are right now being tested across 5,000 institutions across the world, and we are trying to find how many of those are scalable, feasible, and have a longevity to go beyond human lives. So today also, within the next 60 minutes that we have with all our amazing speakers, we'll try to know from them that how is education changing. The difference in today's format is very simple. Every time it's a timed platform. So today also it's a timed platform, but it's a panel discussion. So the first slot, once your first speaking slot gets over, then the floor gets open and you can all interact and question each other's opinions and innovations. And just to maintain order, we'll try to respect each other's time and space constraints. So I hope all the panelists give each other the right kind of, the quote unquote right space to speak. So before I start this call, this is a bilingual platform, so you can speak either in English or in Hindi. You can use a third language, but the challenge is I won't get it, but you can still use it. So try sticking to any of these languages, preferably English, so that most of the people understand the call. And today we'll try to know from you. COVID came, the world changed, there has been a lot of commotion around. We went to a standstill position where our brains went into an absolute commotion. And now, when we are trying to resume education across the world in different geographies, different ecosystems, what we are finding is most of the pedagogies, most of the understanding that we had about education and the teaching learning process has been challenged and has been so drastically and dramatically challenged that now we have to find out a completely new relationship between the teacher and the learner. And if I put the school education in the epicenter, now nobody is the custodian of knowledge, because some server somewhere in the US or some server owned by the Amazons and the Googles of the world is the real custodian of knowledge, because now you're just a facilitator. So the role has changed. There's no big stage where there is a big guy who's a teacher. Now everybody is a peer. And when you are in a classroom, you're between friends. And to teach friends is a really difficult task. So what do you think, and how do you think education is innovating, changing? Let's know it from all of you. Let me now invite the first speaker for today to add a perspective of higher education and to initiate this roundtable and set the ball rolling. A very warm welcome to Mr. Jim Crawley, who's Director of Global Recruitment at Hope College, Holland, Michigan, US. Jim, a very warm welcome to the platform. The next 3 to 4 minutes are yours. Please unmute your audio and let's understand from you, how is education innovating, or how are you innovating for education?
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a pleasure. Welcome to everyone. So I work at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. We're a small private liberal arts college on the west side of Michigan, about 3,000 students. So I think we face challenges, the same challenges that a big school faces. I just think that we've been able to maybe react and act a little bit differently because of our size. We have actually been in person the whole year. So we moved to remote learning last March, when basically the world did. So for just the last couple of months of that semester, we were remote, but we did go in person this year. So for us, the change has been this combination of hybrid learning. So our students were in person, and they are 60% of our classes have been in person, 20% have been truly hybrid, and 20% have been online. But we've been very careful too about making sure that our first year learners, our first year university students, have had a minimal exposure to online, because we really felt the importance of that face-to-face learning for them. Of course, it kind of depended on what course they took. If it's a large lecture style class, we made accommodations in the sense that we would put the lecture itself that would normally be in we don't have large lecture halls, so 75 might be the biggest lecture hall we have, but so that 75 person lecture would have been online, but then we would break them into small groups so that we would still get that one-on-one learning. I think another change that we have had to make, and I think everybody has faced the technology related to testing and keeping your campus safe in different ways. And we do wastewater testing on campus so that all of our buildings are in kind of pods, or they all go to the same 3 or 4 buildings will go to the same wastewater collection. So we test the wastewater. That way you can find the virus a little bit earlier before it becomes a spread. So we've kept our numbers very low on campus. So I think the adjustment to the online learning and our hybrid learning, and then keeping in mind the necessity of keeping the campus safe and keeping the students in an active learning atmosphere have both been important things that I think we've done very well. And for that reason, we've been able to stay in-person learning. And I think that's important, especially since we're known for our STEM programs. So, the ability to do research, you really have to be there to do it. It's pretty difficult to do some of this laboratory work online. So we feel we've done that pretty well. So that's a little bit about what we've done at Hope College.
Thank you so much, Jim. So to summarize what you said, remote learning started last March. This year you again resumed in-person learning, 60% in-person classes you were continuing, with 20% hybrid and 20% absolutely online. You tried to get most of the first-year students in the in-person classes, kept the numbers low on campus, and tried to create an active learning atmosphere, because your college, which is known for its STEM learning programs, the major amount of time was to be spent on research, and that cannot be done virtually. So this was kind of the scenario in most of the places that we were trying to find a new hybrid model of learning, but the learning mechanism, the kind of focus on facts, the kind of focus on content has now shifted more on pedagogy, more on psychology, and more in the learning process. So let's now try to know a little bit more from somebody else or the next speaker for today. I would now request Mr. Christian, the Director of International Recruitment at York College of Pennsylvania from US, to take the next 4 minutes to add his contribution to this roundtable.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate being here. Yeah, I think education has been changing quite a bit, not just this year, but over the past maybe 10 years or so. But I think this year has really pushed some permanent changes. So when you look at things like recruitment, okay, take the SAT exam, and students get really worried about the SAT exam. The SAT-2 subject test, that was on its way out. Now it's officially going to be done. There's going to be 1 or 2 more sessions, and that's it. Virtual events became something that was going to be, really popular, because we couldn't have people on campus. We couldn't do those types of things. So now we can still do virtual events to engage with people and broaden our reach. And they've gone so well that I think we're going to keep some of them. So that's been great. That's been very good. Because we would get international students logging in, maybe 100 people registered for a particular event, and we couldn't do that in the past. So that has provided us with some opportunities. We've also taken a look at different things, the way we recruit people. So we're doing a lot of Zoom sessions like we're doing now, and we're trying to engage with students, but students aren't visiting schools like they used to. So we've had to rely on other things. So we've taken a look at things like Google Analytics. Are people hitting our websites? Where are they from? Are they hitting from certain web pages and so forth? Where are they located? How are they getting to us? Looking at platforms like Google Trends. Because in India, if you go in and say, okay, where's computer engineering? Where's that really popular? You can find that out, because it's not just popular in certain areas. It is popular in certain areas, more so than, say, a business program in certain areas of India. So you have to take a look, and that could position you differently the way you recruit in the future. I think when you look at York, one of the way the curriculum has changed is you have things like co-ops, cooperative exchanges. And I know Jim's school has this too, where if you're an engineering student, you have to do an internship. It's required. you're working at another organization. It could be internationally, it could be within the United States. And for us, it's 42 weeks. These are paid internships, and you're not paying tuition fees for classes, and you're making money, a good salary for students, you know, $25,000, $30,000 over the course of 42 weeks. This is really amazing stuff. So gone are the days where you just have a teacher sitting in front of a classroom, reading from a book, or, you know, you just don't have that so much. Students are much more engaged with their curriculum now. They're much more hands-on. They're doing projects and so forth. And that's way I think has changed. The curriculum has changed not so much in the short term, but the long term as well.
Thank you so much, Christian. Some of the changes that happened due to COVID, due to all this lockdown and we going to our homes, was that there were some permanent changes that will stay with us, like virtual events, like hybrid classes. Then co-ops increased. We now are looking for more and more opportunities to work collaboratively with many people. And internships are becoming a really important part in curriculums across the world. Even when I talk of India, India just got a new education policy for itself. Because in India, education is absolutely regulated by the government. And here, once the policy changes, only then systems and the execution changes. And even in India, internships are becoming a very important part of studies and curriculums in higher education. So let me now invite somebody who will add a different kind of perspective to the discussion. She's somebody who heads the law college at Adamas University, Kolkata in India, has a real life experience of being one of the high court judges in India, which is a very big position for the legal setup in India. And she's known for some of her judgments in the past. So let's have her perspective on how is the education of law or establishment changing in a country like India, which is very diversified. And as the news suggests, it's always on a very shaky ground when we talk about legislation. So a very warm welcome to Dr. Jyotsna Yagnik, who's the Pro Vice Chancellor of Adamas University, Kolkata, West Bengal. Jyotsna ji, over to you. Please unmute your audio and a very warm welcome.
Thank you, Daksh. As such, transformation is a rule of real life, and therefore it can never be something new. But speaking for education, and more particularly methods of teaching learning, relationship of teacher and taught, I would say that I noticed 180 degree of change. It is absolutely a new world. I have started teaching in 1985. Then I became judge. Then even today also I am imparting legal education to judges as well as to senior officers. But what I notice is that the relationship which was existing between teacher and taught, which was connected absolutely with original Asian ideology and more particularly Indian ideology, the ideology which was given to us by Gurukuls in the ages of Ram and Krishna, where Guru was everything, maybe for the prince also. But slowly and gradually what I'm noticing is that the relationship has changed to great extent. Today, I would say that after COVID, what I have noticed is that there is a need of reverse mentorship. If I have to take a classes, maybe something on IT, I might not be knowing. I will have to ask some student who has actually come to listen to me or to learn from me to teach me that. So there's one new ideology which I have embraced for myself is reverse mentorship. To many of the aspects, technological and otherwise, I shall have to accept that the youngsters who is learning from me, from the experience of my life, I will have to also learn something from him. In our Indian Contract Act and in many acts where there is an illustration of teacher and taught, it was said that teacher is the one who has tremendous influence in the mind of the student, the teacher's influence. And based on that, if it is found that the contract was executed because of that influence, then such a contract is even avoidable. But from that, we have come to the situation where if you don't treat your student friendly, they would not like you. They want teachers to be very friendly with them. They want teacher not to give them any sort of burden. And I think I am having only 4 minutes, so I'll say something in the next round. But I would like to end with the say that it is now high time where we all academicians will have to bother, more particularly those like me who are connected with professional education, will have to think how to change our exam pattern. We have to change the exam pattern in such a way, believing that those who are giving examination on virtual platform should not be given an opportunity to do cut, copy, paste. So we will have to turn to original thinking, more creative ways of thinking, to give more such food to our student or to the persons who are appearing in the examination, and should test their original ability. I think that time has come, and that quasi guardian relationship, which was original ideology of India and Asian, will have to be slowly forgotten. We'll have to embrace the ideology which is prevalent in West, and that is nothing wrong in that. I think that's also new way to look, because in age of blended learning, if we stick to our original Gurukul Pratha, neither the student will be benefited, nor the teacher. That's what my humble belief is. I shall contribute more as and when my second turn will come. Thank you, Daksh.
Thank you so much, Jyotsna ji. To summarize what you said, that it's a 180-degree phase shift. Things have changed completely when we talk of the Indian environment, at least, because here there was a big digital infrastructure crisis. And the government data says nearly 60% of the learner population of the country did not access any form of learning or education during the complete lockdown period, which was somewhere around 8 to 9 months. So it was a major setback for the learner population of India. You went on to say that the Indian education ideological connect that established between a teacher and a student, and you also define teaching and learning from the Indian Contract Act, coming from the Indian Constitution, that a teacher is somebody who has a lot of influence or impact on the learner. But now it has absolutely changed, and you talked about reverse mentorship, which is now a norm, because most of the senior teachers in most of the education institutions might not be that tech savvy the way they have students who are superbly tech savvy. So now you have to learn from them and create an atmosphere of friendship between in the whole atmosphere, because otherwise, if you still are in a teacher learner mode, this brand positioning is a big deterrent to learning right now. So we need to rethink on these. And finally, we have to check and change the way we assess students, because when we now till now memorization was a very big part of test that you wanted to test and understand. Now it's not. Now we need to tell them how to learn, unlearn, and relearn things. You need to teach them 21st century skills. So let me now invite somebody who will now add a perspective from the K-12 segment on how has education changed, how is innovation flowing there. Because when we talk of higher education, it's easier to mitigate to an online platform simply because you already have an active learner at hand. But when it's the K-12 space, the learner has not become so active. He's rather shying away from the process of teaching learning. So how do you tackle the challenges within that space? A very warm welcome to Mr. Riaan O'Brien, former Vice Principal, the Western Australia International School from Vietnam. Riaan, over to you for the next 3 minutes. Please unmute your audio and a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this platform. It's a privilege being here. I've been a teacher for the past 15 years or so, and I'm hoping to be a teacher for the next 50 years, if I can. So if I may move on to today's topic, innovation in education. Where do we start? Because it's so broad in itself, and with COVID going around the world, it has made it even more challenging. The way I see it is, it really starts with a genuine interest and love, passion for what we do, teaching and learning. So when I think of teaching and learning, I don't just think of students learning, but teachers themselves, right? I believe no one wants to, I always tell my students to, no one should learn from a teacher who stopped learning. That's very important. So with a genuine interest in teaching and learning, it goes on to passion, it goes on to setting goals and achieve those goals. And more so, to develop a program for a future we ourselves know very little about. A future that we might not even see, but they will, students. So how do we do this? And I think to prepare students for this unknown future is like to focus on critical thinking skills along with problem solving, peaceful communication, negotiation, and negotiating with reason. And along this, understanding the curriculum, the content, and the relevance as to how they learn and why they should learn it. Because no one wants to do something if they don't know what's in it for them, right? So if I can think of a specific example, not too long ago, we lost a science teacher. And as we could not recruit a science teacher, I took on the responsibility. I walked in the classroom, it was a chemistry class, and I took out the curriculum and I discussed with the students. I said, look, so this is what we have to learn. This is what you should know. And this is why you should know this, and how we're going to do it. So part of the discussion, I told them that I haven't touched the subject, but I have all the content there, so how do we do it? And I said, look, different ways we could do it. So we developed a group. We divided the objectives into quarters, and I split the class into 4 groups. And I said, okay, look, this group is responsible for teaching this chunk of the information. Another group is responsible for that part. And then they started to say, teacher, can I use Prezi? Can I use Animoto for animation? And I said, what are you talking about, guys? Like, just do it. Whatever you have to do, do it. You are the teachers now. And man, did I learn a lot. They taught me. So I sat in the class. I was a student. So they showed me things that I didn't even know exist. So I took notes of the things that they came up with, and they covered the curriculum in such a broad way, actually, that I was amazed. So I took notes of the things I learned, and at the end of the whole unit, we had a discussion. I said, guys, you know what? You taught me these things, and I didn't know. I studied these things when I was at school and university, but I never really learned the things you covered. But it was very interesting. I provided them with the tools, like we had an assessment tool. So they assessed their classmates and whatever too. So when we discussed the assessment outcome, they were actually harsher on the class. I think, are we done?
I think there was a technical glitch. You can continue.
Okay, so I can continue, right? So they were actually more strict on their classmates, and then so I gave them their classmate the feedback, the assessment outcome. We discussed it, and when I gave them my assessment outcome, they were quite amazed. They said, teacher, you're so generous. So that helped them to understand too. But I was all along just a facilitator in the class. And I think what I learned from this whole experience is that as leaders of education, we need to be flexible, and we need to support our educators, our teachers, remove all the fear and the strict expectations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a curriculum and you should cover these things, not necessarily in that order. Teach them how to understand the curriculum with flexibility, how to map the content. You don't.
Thank you so much, Riaan. The time was over now. So to summarize what you said, you started with first not learning from a teacher who himself has stopped learning. So this is very important, because a teacher who keeps himself or herself updated is very critical now, because the kind of students you're teaching and the kind of future that you're preparing for, preparing them for, is very, very dynamic. And there's an underlying paradox in education that you learn from a generation older than you, and you teach a generation that's younger than you. So you take a 2-generation gap to the learner. So we must be very, very flexible and receptive towards what your final content consumer is doing. Rather, if you consider education as a business, then look towards customer satisfaction and customer feedback more than just completing the curriculum. Don't let the curriculum drive the content, let the consumer drive the content. And that's what you did in your chemistry class, where you enabled them with the right tools, and everything else they did on themselves. So thank you so much. And finally, where you ended, that we must be more and more flexible with the process of teaching and learning. And now this is no more an option. It's now a critical element of any teaching learning process of flexibility, because we are right now in an atmosphere where your student knows much more than you. So in such an atmosphere, if you're not flexible, then what happens is you're just transferring knowledge or content which won't be of any use for them. So thank you so much, Riaan. Let me now invite the next speaker for today, Mr. Mohammad Jahirul Islam, Vice Principal, New Blown School from Uttara, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Jahirulji, over to you for the next 3 minutes. Please unmute your audio and a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Am I audible to all of you? Thank you. Thank you, Daksh, giving me the opportunity to say something. So I warmly welcome all of you from Bangladesh. Good evening to all of you. Asha kori apnara shobai bhalo achen. So this is actually kind of innovation when you greet with your own language. Okay, so I'm really glad for having the opportunity to speak about such a topic, which is innovation in education. So for me, with my little knowledge, as I understand, that is, innovation is a kind of need, okay, which is coming out from some kind of instrumental needs. For me, there can be two components of innovation. Before I go further to that particular discussion, let me say something about my organization. I have been currently working at New Blown School, and we have 3 campuses in our locality, and we have approximately 2,000 students, and we have both English version and Bangla medium education in our system, and we have from play up to SSC level students in our campus. Okay, so as I was talking about, innovation should have some kind of focus, okay? So when we talk about education, innovation in education, so particularly it should have at least 2 particular focus. First one is philosophical, second one is some kind of instrumental, in my opinion. And for 21st century, it's more instrumental, if I consider in that way. Instrumental in that sense that nowadays is more about not only thinking, being able to do something with that particular skill. It's not only about knowledge, it's also about performance. So when does that innovation become indispensable? Because when the prosaic things, whatever is existing, if it is not working properly, then actually we need innovation. Otherwise, why do we need innovation? That's the first question. So we need innovation to make something, whatever we are doing, whether it's education or any other field, we need to make it more effective and more productive. That's why we need innovation. Now, if I consider my context in Bangladesh, in my organization, if I more narrow down that, then in our organization, what happened for the innovation when COVID, just shattered the world? We didn't really stop at our end. We could have stopped. Many educational organizations, they stopped. They couldn't really reach their students. But we thought that through innovation, we could reach our students. So we actually grabbed technology, especially Zoom. And through the revelation of Zoom, actually, we reached our students. And now we could possibly reach about 60 to 70% students through the operation of Zoom. Okay, so our students are no more sitting back at the home, not studying. Through the courtesy of Zoom, we could actually operate our students. We could help them. Still, we are continuing our education chariot with the help of Zoom. In the case of that, okay. Another thing is like that in our assessment system, it was kind of more conventional in the past. It is something, throughout the year, they are reading and studying, and we have 3-semester exam, first term, second term, but nowadays it's more assignment or project based, as I have heard from one of the speakers say that we are now assessing our students through the assignment rather than the more paper-based exam or some kind of, summative exam. Okay, so we are trying to assess our students through that. So innovation is everywhere, okay? Innovation in the assessment system, innovation, how you interact, as I have heard Dr. Jyotsna, when she was talking, that nowadays the role of the teacher, it had changed, okay? So it had changed from the role of more domineering something, from more something you are authoritative, it is something more facilitator role of a teacher in the class. He's trying to be at the center, trying to help out the students. He's behaving more friendly with the students. So if you are not thinking in an innovative manner out of the box, what will happen? That students will no more listen to you, they will no more find interest in you. Okay, so I guess.
Thank you so much, Jahirul ji. So the first slot of time was over, and philosophical and instrumental focus of innovation. Innovation, it happens in many, many different ways. We need to realign it again and again. Innovation, just before COVID, was a thing that we did after a gap of at least 5 or 7 years in any process. But now what we see that it's a norm of everyday life, that you need to innovate, do a crisis management thing, and continue with your life, because the kind of challenges COVID or something like this we would face in the future is something that would need continuous crisis management. So now we move on to the second section of the discussion. During this duration, it's an open floor. You can keep your audios unmute, you can speak, but just take care of each other while you're speaking. So the next leg of this discussion is, most of the institutions and education institutions across the world are facing financial crisis, because in the last 1 year, students could not come to the classes. The fee got disrupted. And now when we're looking at admissions, the international movement has nearly stopped. It's getting very difficult to get international students enrolled in the courses, because if it's an online course, then paying for an in-person class is something, again, very different. So let's have a perspective. Or what do you think? How would the international admission process change, or how would admissions change in the coming next 3 to 4 months? So anyone from you can take this question, and then we can continue further. Anybody wants to take, please unmute your audio.
So I think we have seen a lot of different changes, especially this past year, and I did touch on some of that, where, you know, the SAT subject test is going away. It's probably gone forever. You know, many schools have gone what's called SAT optional, because people just did not have the opportunity to take the exam. You've seen increased test taking for online platforms such as Duolingo. The TOEFL exam has now, you know, produced their own at-home exam. I think it's actually called TOEFL at Home. And they're even reducing their costs by half, and that'll come out shortly. So those are some changes. You know, I talked about the virtual events and so forth. So I think providing greater accessibility to education during these times is going to help us pull us through. And any of us that have an international organization, you know, places in India and Bangladesh and Vietnam, United States, you know, we have people, our own countries are very varied in our cultures. The East is different from the West, the North is different from the South, and so forth. You're still bringing all these people together. And one of the things that I always loved about international students is they add that extra element of diversity and contribution to classroom discussions. You know, none of us know everything, but together we know a lot more. And I think that won't change. Offering a curriculum and offering opportunities where everyone can get together and share ideas will only help all of us in the future.
Just wanted to add one more aspect to this question, that how do you think the curriculums or the courses that we offer right now and the fee that we charge for it, how would these models change? Because now it'll always be a hybrid model. So the money involved would change, the kind of engagement would change, the teachers would change. So what's your crystal gazing on this? So anybody can answer this.
That's a tough one. It's always under debate.
Yeah, I think the cut in education cost is probably what worries me really, like trying to find ways to shortcut the curriculum in terms of time and content, and the quality of teachers we educate to do the job, to save money, to help parents. It's an ongoing struggle. And when you say 3 months, it's good to see it that way. I mean, it's for the short term, but I think we will feel the effects, the impact of COVID for at least another year or even more so. And I think to have plans for indicators like 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year, these are the things we need to focus on too, because many people still have jobs. And although they're under lockdown, parents and employees, they still earn at least maybe 70 or 50% of their income. But when companies starting to fail and they become unemployed, that's when we will really start to feel the impact. So I think how do we maintain a good program with good educators, because teachers are the most important resource and we need to invest in them. But to do so, I think that's the big challenge for many.
Absolutely. So Jyotsna ji wanted to add something, I suppose.
I said the hard reality of shortage of fund and all that cannot be disputed. The change of situation, more particularly Corona, has changed the picture altogether. New colors have certainly been added if you positively think, but at the same time, many things have started missing. And in paucity of fund, and as has been rightly said by my friend, when the jobs are being cut off or people have lost their jobs, teachers have been lessened, I think in the interest of student fraternity, what we can do is that we can prepare the modules where self-study will be more important. Our examination patterns will also have to be changed to more assess the inner ability of the student, to add innovative or creative power of the student. I think that would facilitate the learners, as well as it would also meet with the challenges which has been created by paucity of fund or lack of admissions or loss of job. That's what my humble belief is.
Daksh, I'd like to share my opinion regarding that topic. At our end, actually, when we also face the same crisis regarding admission, throughout the Corona period, still now we are struggling. In the previous year, as you said, that we have 2,000, and this year is reduced to 13 to 1,400 students. So we lose almost 600 students. So the thing is like that, to cope with this kind of problem, this year actually we provided some kind of discount, because this is kind of online education right now. So instead of regular admission, we actually reduced that to actually meet the financial crisis in our country that is actually our guardians are facing. We are also trying to equip our Zoom classes with more technology rather than some kind of conventional thing. So we are making our teachers in such a way so that they can cope up with the Zoom technology. They can, they can also fulfill some kind of physical class demand where they used to interact. So in the Zoom, they are also trying to cope up with the Zoom just breakout room. They can make their students work in the group. So for this kind of thing, we are also highlighting that throughout the online education, we can also meet up with the physical education, face-to-face education. This way, we also try to cope up with the crisis of admission in this Corona period.
Okay, so people are finding solutions as per their ecosystems. I would want to get Jim's opinion on how has international recruitments changed. As Kristen already pointed out, the subject examination is going away. TOEFL, introducing a model of TOEFL at home, with again reducing their fees for it. So how do you see the trends and the numbers changing for the next academic session, and the kind of course structure that will change?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question. And a lot of this, we just don't know to a certain extent. I think at Hope, we've been very fortunate in that our enrollment is still up this year, including from international. I think it helps that we were in person. That certainly helped our being able to maintain that enrollment. But I think, as Christian talked about what we've moved to with the virtual recruiting, it's created kind of an uncertainty or an unknown about what does the future hold for those numbers, because it's much more difficult when you're not in person in terms of recruiting to really get a grasp on how the families and how the students are thinking. I think financially, relative to your question, it certainly caused us, we haven't adjusted our fees at all, again, because we've been in person. That's been the primary reason that there hasn't been an adjustment, although we've certainly noticed for the U.S. citizens, the increase in need-based aid that we're having to award because of changes in income that we've just kind of talked about. We've also run into, cost-wise changes to classroom technology, which was just mentioned by our colleague, and then also, even adjusting the space within our campus to, accommodate the social distancing in the classrooms. I think our students have noticed the changes in terms of obviously different types of social activities that can't happen, the large group activities, and the athletics have been affected, which for some kids, that's a big part of their college experience. So I think there's certainly a lot of changes. And I think as we talk to students, when you talk about recruitment, we need to just be very open and honest with the students about what things look like and what the changes look like, and the fact that there's things we don't know. And I think that's all important. Transparency is very important because the students can't visit the campus. So we have to, we are the face of the campus for them. And we just need to be very upfront and honest about what things look like right now, and not, not be promising when it's going to change, because we don't know that.
Absolutely. So now in the next section of the discussion, I would want to typically ask the future from all of you. I want you to gaze the crystal and tell us that would institutions, and specifically education institutions, be only certifying agencies in the future? What's the critical element that an educational institution would add to education? Would it be just that certificate or a degree that you're giving? Or there is something more that you'll be giving? Because now, when education can be done virtually, most portions of it and most parts of it, because even now we are in the process where we have got technology to do even laboratory experiments virtually. So where do you think, or how do you think, the critical element of physical education, what is it, and how would it change? And how would it change the role, the positioning of an education institution in the coming 5 years, with keeping in perspective the affordability of online education?
I think you have seen a lot of, and this has been an emergence the past few years, of what's called micro-credentials, and things like certificates and sort of something in between a certificate and, say, a master's degree, something to just kind of get ahead a little bit. I think you're going to see more people adding these type of things. You also hear them called, I think they're called badges. I think that's what they're called. Badges, micro-credentials, certificates, and so forth. So you have this whole portfolio of things that are available to you now. And as you go through your education, your job changes and your employment changes. So you got to take a little piece of this education, a little piece of that skill, and so forth, in order for you to improve yourself, improve your performance at work, and maybe get your company ahead, your position ahead, your department moving forward, and so forth. So I think you're going to see that increase a little bit more. Having the opportunity to do that more online now only provides more accessibility. And anytime you have accessibility to education, things are improving. Ultimately, that's why we're here. We want to improve the accessibility to education. And I think is what we're all after.
Also, I think maybe one of the major challenges too with this is the way we assess the effectiveness of this program. Since assessment is what drives any program. So how do we assess the effectiveness of these programs, and which of these programs are really trusted actually? Because trust plays a big role. I mean, it's one thing to earn an online qualification, but where do you go with this qualification? Are there people who trust this? Because of obviously there are well-recognized schools. If you're from the school, it's a trusted school, but then there are other schools that have now moved into more online to reduce the cost, but they are not as recognized as other schools. And that's, for me, I think that raised a bit of a question as to which of these certificates are trusted and which of these schools are actually trusted, and how effective are they actually really. And I think it goes back to assessment, how we assess these programs.
From micro-credentials to credible institutions, and trying to understand their credibility. But as Christian said, and I would just put one more element to the question, that when we talk of access to education and accessibility to education, that's a big enemy to premium education. And how do premium colleges across the globe and premium institutions across the globe see that is again one more question. So I would want Jyotsna ji's perspective on this, and what's her crystal gazing for the next 5 years?
I believe that blended learning is now mandatory. Nobody can take away that feature from the education now. It may be in any sphere, in any field, in any faculty, but it has to be blended learning. Now, so far so, whatever UGC and other regulatory authorities have given direction, we have done huge investment in lands, building, and many things. But we have paid very little attention to IT development. So I think a biggest thing which we now will have to think, and more particularly government everywhere will have to think about effective Wi-Fi coverage and free effective Wi-Fi coverage. So that should, I believe that it will even translate in election propaganda. Because if that is done, when youngsters are the voters, they will always think that I must have availability of free Wi-Fi, free education. Because we know in India and in many other countries, for paucity of Wi-Fi or for not having proper coverage of Wi-Fi, many could not complete their education of this year, and some of them had to take drop. And rightly said that guardians are facing lot of difficulty of providing Wi-Fi facility to their wards and even to pay the fees, etc. So if Wi-Fi coverage is not taken care of, and more particularly free, effective, meaningful, non-stop without interruption, if that is not provided, I don't think any purpose is likely to be served. All this, whatever panel discussion and everything we do, the heart of all the discussion has to be free, effective Wi-Fi coverage. That's what my belief is.
That's what India faces right now, nearly 1.3 billion people. Finding a way to patch the digital divide, because till now there was an economic divide in developing countries like India, but now there's a digital divide. So now let's have the crystal gazing from Jim. What does he think? That will higher education institutions just be certifying agencies, or would they be adding some other critical element to education?
Well, I think some of the things that as we look forward, that we need to be very conscious of. In the U.S., our institutions have been very supportive and very active with their students in, for example, career planning. And helping them to not only work on their majors while they're a student, but obviously looking toward the future and what is the next step for them? What is the next option in terms of graduate school, in terms of the job force? And I think we've got to think about new ways of doing that. Not just obviously the in-person, having our companies come and interview our students on our campus certainly is the best way to do it. But considering the times, and we certainly hope we get back to doing that, but for right now, we can't do things the way we used to do. So we have to be, we're very concerned, I know on the US side, and I know institutions worldwide. I just happen to know in the US, we do things very well in terms of career planning and placement. And so we've got to think about how do we make sure that our students are connected with these practical experiences. With the, Christian talked about the co-op learning. How are we making sure that they're getting these hands-on experiences? I mean, 94% of our students graduate with experiential learning. So they've done internships or research or study abroad. So how do we make sure that continues to happen? We don't want to lose that aspect of education in the US. So I think we need to be conscious of how do we continue to do tutoring, career planning, internship planning, internship placements. How do we do that in today's time when we can't do as much in person, to add more of that validity again to our degree? And that is, being able to graduate with practical experience, which I think is crucial, especially for the international students.
Absolutely. Practical experience, micro credits, and credibility of institutions. Many factors would now influence the positioning of an education institution in the coming times and the perception that students carry for it. So now let's have the final crystal gazing from Jahirul ji before we conclude the discussion. Jahirul ji, what's your crystal gazing that what's going to happen in your country, in your ecosystem in the next 5 years? would educational institutions just be degree giving institutions, or would they be adding some other critical advantage to the whole teaching learning process?
Thank you for this question, though, I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer, because whatever is going to be transpire in the next 5 years is very difficult to predict. But there's certainly, as Dr. Jyotsna said, I certainly agree with her. That is, there will be some kind of blended learning. It's no more like it's going to be a conventional one. And we must cope up with this kind of thing. I also agree with her at that point that even in our country, Bangladesh, our government, current government, the government of Bangabandhu, daughter Sheikh Hasina, she's trying her level best to make the country digitalized in all the way. So you also know that our country, has our own satellite. So there are lots of, positive things are coming around in our country. Those will certainly help. And I guess in the next 5 years in our country, the institutions which will be very much, something they can adapt with the technological advancement. They can also grab the opportunities. They can also, can cope up with the changes, the new normals. I guess those institutions will be able to survive. Otherwise, many educational institutions in our country, in the period of pandemic corona, those are already closed. Okay, I'm just telling you the reality. And only those institutions who coped with the situation by adopting the technology using Zoom or Google, or there are some other technologies, those institutions are surviving. Okay, so if yes, Wi-Fi and some other technological things through which the current education can be promoted, if those can be made available in our country and even in any other developing country or developing nations, I guess in the next 5 years, as there certainly will be no more normal work, what we're supposed to know in the previous time. So the education scenario, the classroom picture, the teacher-student relationship interaction, and through the assessment system, everything, there's going to be change. And to cope up with that change, so the institutions which will be able to cope up with the change and cope up with the technological advancement, they will be able to survive, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jahirul. So before this talk comes to an end, what does Blub actually do? Blub works on a very simple concept of teens inspiring teens, because when we started working in the education space, we realized that most of the stories and most of the learning that happens through stories, the cause and effect relationship that we establish between things. That's where education really transpires and finds its way into the learner. And most of these stories don't relate to the teens or the people that we have within our learning population. So we started to find such stories of inspiring teens from across the world and started sharing them with other teenagers. Till now, we have covered nearly 500 such teens. And before this call comes to an end, a small story of one such teenager for all of you. She's a girl who lives in Melbourne, Australia, started her painting career at the age of 2, never went to a school, had the first successful exhibit at the age of 4, which was an absolute sold-out show, was invited to one of the most respected galleries in Europe at the age of 7, again for a sold-out show. Right now is only 13 years old and she earns in millions. And she is Elita Andre, who was the cover page of Blub World some time back. Now, while working with these teenagers, we found one very important element in education. If you look at the global scenario, education across democracies is mostly governed by governments. So we thought, let's try to intervene and advocate for something that impacts policy. So Blub World is establishing an institution within 2021 where we'll be interacting with nearly 300,000 teenagers across the world to establish the world's first exclusive World Teen Parliament. We have just closed a kind of a collaboration with the UNESCO, and some of the best teens that we select will be attending UNESCO's General Conference in Paris in November of 2021. So wherever you are, whatever you are doing, if you find any teenager who can do something amazing to the world around him in improving human lives, do keep telling it to us. And most importantly, find a way that you can create a policy in education and around education which keeps education relevant. Otherwise, once technology takes it over, what will you be teaching? Will only technology be teaching? thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of the Blub World Web Talks 127th episode. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed, and if you want to attend the future sessions, you can open your audio, say a big yes, and thank you so much for being a part. And namaste from India. Thank you so much, people. Thanks
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Daksh. Thank you, Blub World. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so much, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.